It was supposed to be the day I said goodbye forever, the day I officially became a widow, my husband's funeral. The grief hung heavy in my eyes, and I was certain that the days I smiled wide and toothy were about to be gone forever with my husband. But grief has a way of hiding the unimaginable. Just as the last mourners left, I received a message that shattered everything I thought I knew. I'm still alive. Trust no one. What followed was a nightmare I never could have imagined. Every secret, every lie, every shadow of the past came roaring back, and I realized that death was only the beginning of the truth. The church bells tolled softly that morning, their mournful echo hanging in the cold air like a lament that refused to end. People moved slowly through the pews, dressed in shades of black and gray, faces blurred with the kind of sympathy that feels practiced. I stood at the front, staring at the closed mahogany coffin that was supposed to contain my husband. Supposed to. The funeral director had told me that the casket would remain sealed. "There were complications," he said gently, eyes avoiding mine. "It's better this way." Martin's death had been sudden. A car crash on a rain-soaked highway 2 weeks ago. They said the vehicle caught fire, and that identification had been made through dental records. But Martin was the most cautious driver I knew. He hated rain, hated speed, hated surprises. Now, as the priest spoke about life, death, and the peace of the departed, I couldn't stop watching the casket. I tried to picture Martin's face inside it, the laugh lines, the steady calm in his eyes, but every time I did, the image slipped away. After the funeral, I simply wanted to be left alone to mourn my husband. I had appealed for the condolence greetings to be quick. I needed to have the time to walk the distance home, to reflect, and maybe find a reason to believe that my husband was never coming back. That's when my phone buzzed. I glanced down, expecting another condolence message, but the name on the screen froze me in place. Martin. For a second, I couldn't breathe. My mind tried to explain it away, someone using his phone, some delayed text, but then I saw the timestamp. It was sent seconds ago. My thumb trembled as I opened it. I'm still alive. Trust no one. The world around me blurred. The chatter of mourners, the rumble of distant cars, and the drizzle tapping against my coat. It all disappeared. All I could hear was the sound of my own heart, beating too fast, too loud. I looked around instinctively. On the far side of the street, a man in a gray suit stood perfectly still, half hidden by the black umbrella he held. He wasn't looking at the casket or the mourners. He was looking at me. When our eyes met, he gave the smallest nod, then turned and walked away. I wanted to call out, to chase after him, but my legs wouldn't move. My sister-in-law appeared beside me again, her hand on my arm. "Eleanor, are you all right?" "You look pale." I forced a nod. Just dizzy," I managed, slipping my phone into my pocket. The message burned against my thigh like a secret I wasn't ready to speak aloud. I tried calling the number, straight to voicemail. I listened to the automated voice that used to make me smile. "You've reached Martin Hale. Leave a message after the tone." I wanted to scream into it, to ask if this was some cruel trick, to demand the truth. Instead, I whispered, "If you're alive, tell me where you are." But the only reply was the low hum of static before the line went dead. Sleep was impossible. By midnight, I was tearing through drawers, searching for, I didn't even know what, something to make sense of the chaos he left behind. That's when I found the storage key taped under his desk. A small silver key marked Unit 47B. The next morning, I drove across town to the facility. The clerk didn't ask questions, just slid me a clipboard to sign. Inside, the air smelled of dust and old fear. The light flickered. And there, stacked neatly against the wall, were boxes labeled in Martin's handwriting. Insurance claims, clients. I hesitated before opening the last one. Inside was a black binder filled with bank statements and photos, people I didn't recognize, names I didn't know, and transfers that made my stomach twist. $78,400 wired from one account to another. Dates matched the months he'd been working late. Another folder, Halcyon Insurance, showed 12 cases of fake death claims totaling over $4.7 million. The message wasn't a prank. Martin hadn't died by accident. He'd been living a double life, one I was never meant to uncover. And now someone out there knew that I was looking. When I left the storage unit, I locked it twice and checked the mirror before driving off. A silver sedan was parked across the street, engine idling. I couldn't see the driver's face, but I didn't need to. Someone was still watching me. And for the first time since the funeral, I wasn't sure who the real ghost was, Martin or me. I made coffee, though I couldn't taste it. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. I thought about calling the police, but what would I even say? My dead husband texted me, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Martin's warning was real. I picked up my phone and scrolled to find someone to call. My thumb hovered over the call button. Instead, I opened my laptop. If Martin were alive, there had to be something, an article, a report, anything that didn't add up. The first few searches were what I already knew. Businessman Martin Hale dies in a highway accident. Wife mourns loss of local entrepreneur. Funeral held yesterday. The same recycled sentences. Then something else caught my eye, a small, overlooked article buried beneath the others. Unidentified passenger missing after crash. My pulse quickened. The report was dated the same night as Martin's accident. It said the police had found signs that a second person had been in the car, but no body had been recovered. No name, no follow-up. Just a mystery that had quietly disappeared. Who had been in that car with my husband? The knock on my door startled me so hard that I nearly spilled my coffee. I froze, heart hammering, as the knocking came again, softer this time, deliberate. I moved quietly toward the peephole. Caroline stood on the porch, her blonde hair pulled back, sunglasses hiding her eyes despite the cloudy sky. She was holding a tray of muffins like we were in some kind of suburban dream instead of a nightmare. "Ellie? It's me," she called softly. "Can I come in?" I brought breakfast. Every instinct screamed no, but I forced a smile and opened the door halfway. "You didn't have to come all the way here." "I wanted to check on you," she said, stepping inside before I could stop her. Her eyes darted around the room, quick and assessing. "You didn't answer my calls this morning." "I turned my phone off," I lied. Caroline set the tray on the counter. "You should eat." "You look pale." Her tone was caring, but her hands were fidgeting. "You know, grief makes people do strange things. Imagine hearing their voice, seeing things that aren't there." The words hit me like a slap. "Why would you say that?" She smiled faintly, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Just, I've been through loss too, remember? Sometimes the mind plays tricks." Her gaze flicked to my phone on the table. "Still using Martin's number?" Before I could answer, her phone buzzed. She glanced down at it quickly, too quickly, then turned the screen away. "I should go," she said, her voice suddenly clipped. "There's something I need to take care of." After she left, I snatched my phone and checked the time. 2 minutes after she walked out, another message appeared. "She's not working alone." The chill that ran through me was unlike anything I'd ever felt. The message was from the same unknown number. I looked out the window again. The gray sedan was back, parked farther down the street this time, half hidden behind a tree. That's when I realized I wasn't just being watched, I was being hunted. That night, sleep was out of the question. Every creak of the house sounded like footsteps. Every shadow in the hallway seemed to shift just slightly when I wasn't looking. I sat in the dark with the phone clutched to my chest, waiting for another message from Martin, or whoever was pretending to be him. Midnight passed, then 1, then 2. Nothing. The silence was almost worse than the text itself. At some point, exhaustion pulled me under, and I must have drifted off on the couch. When I opened my eyes again, morning light was leaking through the blinds. For a brief, fragile second, I forgot everything. the crash, the funeral, the messages. But then I saw the phone on the table, and it all came rushing back like a tidal wave. I unlocked it, and there it was, a new text, sent at 3:47 a.m. Go to the Bronze Center. The truth is there. Don't tell anyone. My breath caught. Martin and I had shared a safe space at the Bronze Center for years, a small one on the edge of town. It was mostly filled with old furniture, boxes of paperwork, and some of his company's files. I hadn't been there since before the accident. But if the message was real, if it really was Martin, then something was waiting for me. The clerk at the front desk didn't even look up when I entered. He just slid the clipboard toward me, the same routine as always. My name, my signature, the key to Unit 56. My hands shook as I unlocked the door. At first, everything looked normal. Dusty boxes, a few pieces of furniture draped with old sheets. But something was different. The smell, a faint trace of something metallic, like oil or blood. I hesitated, my heart thudding painfully in my chest. Then I saw it. Martin's photo. A different name. Marcus Webb. My knees gave out. I sat there on the cold concrete, staring at the evidence that my husband, the man I buried a week ago, had been planning to disappear. Was he alive? Had he faked everything? Or had someone else used him for something darker? As I reached into the bag to pull out one of the passports, I noticed a small, folded piece of paper wedged between the stacks of money. My hands trembled as I unfolded it. If you're reading this, it means they got to me first. Trust no one, not even those closest to you. I read it over and over, my pulse hammering so loudly I could barely hear my own thoughts. This was Martin's handwriting, without question. But the message didn't make sense. They got to me first? Who were they? Suddenly a faint sound echoed behind me, a car door slamming. My body went rigid. Slowly, I peered through the narrow slats of the storage door. The gray sedan was parked just outside the gate. My instincts screamed at me to run. I shoved the note into my pocket, zipped the duffel halfway, and turned toward the exit. But before I could reach the door, my phone buzzed again. My breath hitched. I looked around wildly, but there was no one there. I dropped the bag and bolted. My footsteps echoed through the empty corridor, every sound amplified in the tight metallic space. I didn't stop running until I reached my car. My hands fumbled with the keys, and just as the engine roared to life, I caught a glimpse of someone in the rearview mirror. A man in a dark coat, standing by the building I'd just left, watching me. And in that instant, I knew two things for certain. The message was real, and my husband's death was part of something far more dangerous than I could ever have imagined. I didn't stop driving until the road began to blur. My knuckles were white around the steering wheel, and my heart thudded in my chest like a drum that refused to stop. Every turn of the road felt like it was pulling me deeper into something I couldn't escape. I didn't even know where I was going. I just knew I had to get away. From the Bronze Center, from that man, from the truth that had started to peel away the life I thought I had. When I finally pulled over, I realized I was miles outside of town, somewhere near the old quarry road that hadn't been used in years. The silence here was heavy, the kind that presses on your skin. I got out of the car and leaned against the hood, forcing myself to breathe. My hands were still shaking. I reached for my phone to call the police, but stopped. Martin's message echoed in my mind. Trust no one. It sounded paranoid, maybe even delusional. But then again, so did a dead man sending text messages. And yet, here I was. I decided to go back home, if only to gather my thoughts. The drive back felt longer than it should have. Every sound, every car, every light behind me felt like a threat. When I finally reached the house, the front porch light was already on. I didn't remember leaving it that way. Inside, the air felt strange, too still, too quiet. I moved carefully through each room, checking the windows, the locks, the corners. Everything looked normal until I reached the kitchen. The chair at the table was slightly pulled out, as if someone had been sitting there recently, and on the table lay something that hadn't been there before. An envelope. No name. Just my address, scrawled in thick black ink. I stared at it for what felt like forever before picking it up. My fingers trembled as I tore it open. Inside were 2 photographs. The first one made my stomach twist. It was me, standing in front of the storage unit just hours earlier. The second, my breath caught. It was Martin, but not alive. The picture was taken in the morgue, his body laid out on a metal table, the white tag still tied to his toe. Someone had been there. Someone had seen him. The image wasn't from the police report. It was recent. Too recent. A small sticky note was attached to the back of the photo. "He's not who you think he is. Neither are they." I stared at the words, bile rising in my throat. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped the photo. Who were they? And how did this person know where I'd been? Before I could even process it, my phone buzzed again. A new message appeared. No name, no number. "They're watching the house. Don't let them see you." My pulse spiked. I turned off the lamp and crept toward the window, heart hammering so loudly I could barely hear my own breathing. I lifted the curtain just enough to see. A black SUV sat across the street, engine idling, no headlights. Just there, silent, patient, wrong. The street that had always felt safe suddenly looked like a stage, and I was the only one left in the spotlight. Someone knew Martin was dead. Someone wanted me to know it too. But the real question wasn't who killed him anymore. It was why they weren't finished with me yet. I turned off the lights and crept to the back door. My breath came out in short, uneven bursts. Every instinct screamed that I needed to leave now. I grabbed my purse, my phone, and the envelope, then slipped quietly into the night. I moved along the fence line, keeping low, heading toward the woods that bordered our property. Once I was deep enough that the house was out of sight, I stopped and tried to think. My husband was alive. He'd left me clues, warnings. But if he was trying to protect me, from whom? And why did it feel like every move I made was being anticipated by someone else? Then, faintly through the trees, I saw it. A flicker of light. A cigarette ember, glowing red. Someone was out there, standing between the trees, watching me. I didn't wait to find out who. I turned and ran. Branches scraped my arms. My breath tore through my throat. But I didn't stop until I saw the lights of the old church at the end of the road. I collapsed behind the stone wall, gasping for air. My phone buzzed again. "You shouldn't have run." And just like that, I realized I wasn't escaping anything. I was being led somewhere, step by step, exactly where they wanted me to go. Rain started to fall in slow, deliberate drops, tapping against the church roof like a metronome counting down to something I didn't yet understand. I stayed crouched behind the stone wall, drenched and trembling, staring at the glow of my phone screen. "You shouldn't have run." The words burned into my brain, replaying over and over until I could barely think. Whoever was sending those messages knew exactly where I was, and that terrified me more than anything. I switched my phone to airplane mode, then yanked the battery out completely. For a long moment, I just sat there, breathing hard, my hair plastered to my face. The church was dark, abandoned. Its tall windows were stained black from years of neglect, and the wooden doors hung crookedly on their hinges. Still, something about it felt safer than the open woods behind me. I pushed the doors open slowly and slipped inside. At the altar, a figure of Christ hung above me, arms outstretched, shadowed in the dim light. I sat in the front pew and buried my face in my hands. "What do I do, Martin?" I whispered. "If you're really alive, why are you doing this to me?" There was no answer, just the sound of wind forcing its way through a cracked window. Then faintly, I heard something else. Footsteps. Soft, deliberate, moving closer. I froze, barely daring to breathe. "Who's there?" My voice came out smaller than I intended. No reply. I reached for my phone before remembering it was dead in my pocket. The footsteps came again, closer this time, echoing from the far end of the aisle. My pulse pounded in my ears. I crouched low, creeping toward a side door near the altar. The hinges squeaked when I pushed it open, revealing a narrow staircase leading downward. Inside, the room was almost empty except for a single chair and a dusty table. On it lay a small radio transmitter, the kind used by security teams or private investigators. And next to it was another envelope, identical to the one I'd found at my house. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a photograph, me again, only this time I was sleeping in my bed. The timestamp at the bottom was from 3 nights ago. A sound behind me made me spin around. A shadow shifted against the wall, tall and unmoving. "Why are you following me?" I demanded, my voice cracking. The shadow stepped forward. It was a man, broad-shouldered, dressed in dark clothes, face hidden beneath a cap. He raised his hand slowly. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said. His voice was calm, low. "You don't know me, but I worked with your husband. I've been trying to keep you alive." My knees went weak. "Keep me alive? From who?" He glanced toward the stairs. "You need to come with me before they find us." "They know you found the storage unit." "Who are they?" I asked again, louder this time. But before he could answer, glass shattered upstairs. Headlights cut through the broken window, bright, blinding. Someone was outside. The man swore under his breath. "It's too late." He grabbed my wrist and pulled me toward a side tunnel I hadn't seen before. "If you want to live, don't look back," he said. And as he dragged me into the dark, I finally realized, whatever Martin had been running from, I was now part of it. We emerged through a broken hatch that led to the back of an overgrown cemetery. The man shut the hatch quietly, glancing over his shoulder as if expecting the shadows to move. "We don't have much time," he muttered. "They'll track the radio signal." I tried to steady my breathing. "Who are you?" He hesitated. "Call me Eric." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one you're getting until we're safe," he replied sharply, scanning the horizon. The rain had stopped, but the air still smelled of wet soil and old stone. "Come on." We weaved through the graves, the moonlight casting long, eerie shapes across the ground. I could barely keep up. My mind was spinning. Martin alive, mysterious messages, a stranger dragging me through tunnels like some nightmare I couldn't wake from. I wanted to scream, to demand the truth, but fear kept my mouth shut. Eric led me to a parked car hidden behind a cluster of trees. It was a dark sedan with no plates. He opened the passenger door and motioned for me to get in. "Please," he said, softer now. "You're in danger." "Let me explain once we're on the move." I climbed in hesitantly, my body trembling with exhaustion. The engine started without a sound. As we pulled away from the cemetery, I watched the church fade in the distance, its broken windows glinting like eyes watching me go. After several minutes of silence, Eric finally spoke, his voice low but steady. "Eleanor, there's something you need to know about Martin." "About what he was involved in?" I turned to him sharply. Don't do that. Don't make him into something he wasn't. Martin was a good man." Eric's hands tightened on the steering wheel, knuckles pale in the passing streetlight. "I know you want to believe that." "I did too, but the truth, it's not what you think." He glanced at me, eyes heavy with something that looked more like pity than judgment. "Martin wasn't murdered by strangers, Eleanor. He was part of something that went wrong, a group that faked deaths for money. They'd take out life insurance policies, stage accidents, and disappear with the payouts. Millions, sometimes. It was called the Halcyon Network." I blinked, struggling to breathe. "Insurance fraud?" "Number. Martin couldn't even lie about his age on a form, let alone—" My voice broke before I could finish. "He wouldn't." "I thought so too," Eric said quietly. "But look at this." He reached into his jacket and slid a folder toward me. Inside were printed bank statements, transfers from an account I didn't recognize. The numbers blurred at first, then came into focus. 6 figures, multiple dates. One transfer led directly to a Cayman Islands account. Another bore Martin's signature. "This one's tied to a man named Victor Lane," Eric continued. "He was Martin's partner in Halcyon. But the night Martin died, Victor withdrew $340,000 and vanished. The others think Martin took the fall to cover for him." I could barely process the words. "So you're saying Martin was in on it? That he faked his death to, what, protect someone?" "No," Eric said softly. "I'm saying he tried to get out." I think he wanted to tell the truth before they silenced him. The air in the car felt thick. I leaned back, staring out at the rain-slicked road rushing past. Every memory of Martin replayed, the way he avoided eye contact when I mentioned the life insurance policy, how he'd worked late that last week, how he'd begged me not to open certain drawers in his office. The realization crawled under my skin like ice. "You knew about this before the funeral, didn't you?" Eric nodded once. "I did. But I needed proof. You were never supposed to be dragged into it." He turned down an unmarked road, stopping near an old farmhouse, half hidden by trees. The headlights cut across its peeling paint and broken fence. Inside, the air smelled of dust and metal. Papers were spread across a wooden table, maps, photos, and stacks of files, all stamped with insurance company logos. I froze when I saw the photo at the top of the pile. It was me, standing in front of my house, the morning of the funeral. Eric followed my gaze. "They've been watching you since the day he died," he said quietly, "because they think you know where the money went." I swallowed hard, forcing the words out. "But I don't. I didn't even know this existed." He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "Then we need to find out who does." If Martin tried to expose them before he died, someone out there will want to finish what he started. And if they believe you have his files, they'll come for me next, I finished, my voice barely a whisper. Eric met my eyes, his expression steady, unflinching. "Not if I can help it. You're not alone in this, Eleanor. I promise you that." The promise should have comforted me, but all I could think about was the folder on the table and the signature I couldn't deny. Martin, my husband, the man I buried, the man I never really knew. The words hung in the air like smoke. Every memory I had of Martin began to twist and bend, the late-night calls, the sudden trips, the quiet unease he sometimes carried like a shadow. Things that once seemed harmless now took on a new, terrifying meaning. Eric watched me closely. He didn't reach out, Eleanor. He couldn't. But someone connected to what he was investigating did. Martin was close to exposing a fraud network, fake deaths, forged claims, millions laundered through shell companies. His own name got tangled in it when he started asking the wrong questions. He paused, glancing toward the window as a car passed slowly outside, its headlights sweeping across the room. Whoever ran that network thinks Martin left evidence behind, and they believe you might have it. The words landed like a weight in my chest. For a second, all I could hear was my heartbeat, loud, uneven, terrified. Eric's gaze hardened. "That's why I brought you here. Not to scare you, to keep you alive." A faint beam of light swept across the curtains. Headlights. A car was pulling up outside. Eric moved quickly, killing the lantern. The room plunged into darkness, save for the faint blue glow of the laptop. "They found us," he whispered. "Stay down." He drew a gun from his jacket and crouched near the window. I pressed myself against the floor, heart hammering so loudly I was sure they could hear it outside. The sound of footsteps crunched on the gravel. Then a soft knock on the door. "Eric," a voice called, calm and male. "We just want to talk." Eric's finger hovered over the trigger. He didn't move. Another knock, harder this time. I turned to him, whispering, "Who are they?" He didn't answer. The third knock came, followed by the sound of a latch snapping. The door swung open, and a beam of light cut through the darkness. Eric fired. The noise was deafening in the small space. Someone screamed. Glass shattered. I crawled beneath the table, my hands shaking uncontrollably. The shooting stopped as suddenly as it began. Then came the sound of boots moving across the floorboards. A figure loomed near me, and before I could move, a gloved hand grabbed my wrist. A voice whispered into my ear, low and cold. "Mrs. Harker, your husband sends his regards." And before I could scream, everything went black. When I woke up, my mouth tasted like metal, and the world around me pulsed in a fog of dim light and the hum of machines. My wrists were bound to a chair with something cold and hard, metal cuffs, not rope. My head throbbed, and when I tried to move, pain stabbed behind my eyes. It took a moment before the memories came crashing back, the gunfire, the voice, and that final whisper, "Your husband sends his regards." The room I was in looked like an abandoned warehouse, with concrete floors, peeling paint, and the smell of oil and damp wood. A single bulb hung from the ceiling, swinging slightly, casting shadows that danced like restless ghosts. Across from me was a table. On it sat a single item, a small black cell phone. Its screen blinked once, as if waiting. Then it rang. The sound was so sharp it sliced through my skull, a phone ringing somewhere in the dim concrete room. My hands were still tied, wrists raw from the cuffs, but I managed to tilt the table enough for the phone to slide closer. The screen lit up with a name that shouldn't have been there, Martin. For a moment, my heart refused to believe what my eyes were seeing. I stared until the ringing stopped. Then it started again. With trembling fingers, I pressed the green button. "Hello?" My voice came out broken, unfamiliar. There was no reply, only static and the faint sound of a recording clicking to life. "Eleanor," Martin's voice said. Calm, steady, recorded. "If you're hearing this, it means they've found you." The world tilted. My stomach turned cold. "Halcyon isn't what it seems," he continued. "They're staging deaths, stealing policies, cashing out lives that still exist on paper. I tried to stop them. But if you're hearing this, I failed. There's a backup drive, proof of everything. Keep it safe. Trust Eric." The line went dead. Before I could breathe, the heavy door swung open. A man stepped inside, dressed in black tactical gear, his eyes unreadable above a mask. "You've listened to it," he said evenly, not asking. "Good. Then you know what we want." "I don't know anything," I whispered. He circled me like a predator. "Your husband was a smart man, but not smart enough. He thought dying would make this go away." A smile ghosted over his face. He was wrong. He pulled a knife, not to use it, just to let me see the glint of it. "Where's the drive?" "I don't know." He leaned close, the smell of cold steel on his gloves making my stomach twist. "Then remember quickly." The lights flickered, once, twice, then went out. A crash echoed above. The man swore, barking orders in another language. Gunfire rattled through the ceiling. I flinched, ducking as glass rained down. Then a hand touched my shoulder. "Stay quiet," a low voice whispered. "I'm getting you out." It was Eric. In seconds, the cuffs were gone. He pulled me up, guiding me through the chaos, bullets splintering the walls. We burst through a side door into the freezing night, lungs burning. I doubled over, gasping. "You knew they'd take me." "I didn't," he said, scanning the darkness. "But I knew they'd try." "Martin left a recording," I said. "He mentioned a backup drive. Proof of the fraud." Eric's expression tightened. "Then they'll never stop." We drove through the night in silence, headlights cutting through fog like knives. My heart still pounded with the echo of gunfire and Martin's voice replaying in my mind, the last thing he ever left me. Finally, I whispered, "What happens now?" Eric's jaw clenched. "Now, we finish what he started." The road stretched endlessly ahead, swallowed by fog. My body trembled with exhaustion, but my mind refused to rest. Martin's voice still echoed in my head, his calmness, his warning, his final plea to trust Eric. We drove for nearly an hour without speaking. The only sound was the hum of the engine and the faint crackle of the heater. Finally, Eric turned off the main road, the tires crunching over gravel as he guided the car down a narrow path surrounded by thick pine trees. The safe house appeared at the end of the trail, a small cabin, weathered and isolated, its windows dark against the forest. It looked abandoned, but the moment we stepped inside, I saw otherwise. The air smelled faintly of metal and dust, and a generator hummed quietly in the back. Eric locked the door behind us, checking each window before pulling the curtains shut. "Sit," he said gently, nodding toward an old couch. "You've been through hell." I sat, still shaking. Martin's message. He said Halcyon's staging insurance deaths, that it was fraud. I don't understand how that even works. He crouched beside the fireplace, striking a match. The light flickered across his face, painting it in soft gold. "They create fake deaths," he said. "Stage accidents, fires, disappearances. They collect the payouts through shell identities. Sometimes they even swap bodies to make it look clean. Martin must have found out how deep it went." "And they killed him for it," I whispered. Eric didn't answer right away. He stared into the flames, jaw tight. "He sent that recording for a reason. That drive, wherever it is, has names, accounts, proof of every false claim they've pulled, enough to bury them." I rubbed my wrists where the cuffs had been, the skin still burning. "You think he hid it somewhere?" "I think he hid it where they'd never look." He turned to face me, his expression unreadable. "Somewhere that mattered to him." "Somewhere that mattered to you." The words hit something deep inside me. Our home, the cottage by the lake, the old study he refused to let me clean. Eric must have read the realization on my face because he nodded slowly. "You know where to start." A storm began to build outside, rain tapping against the windows like impatient fingers. I stared into the fire, my heart splitting between grief and determination. Martin was gone. But if I could find what he left behind, maybe his death wouldn't be in vain. Eric stood, loading a fresh magazine into his gun. "Get some rest." We moved before dawn. I wanted to ask him what would happen if Halcyon found us first, but the answer was already written in his eyes. They wouldn't stop, not until the truth was buried, or we were. The study was small, lined with papers, maps, and drawers filled with old files. Eric began searching methodically, while I drifted toward the desk. My hand brushed against something uneven beneath the drawer, a hidden panel. "Eric," I whispered. He was beside me in seconds, watching as I pried the wood open. Inside was a small metal box, no bigger than my palm. My breath caught when I saw the initials etched faintly on top. "MH, my husband's." Eric took the box carefully, turning it over. "This could be it," he said. "The drive." I reached for it, but before I could touch it, a faint sound drifted through the window, the crunch of gravel under tires. Eric froze. We exchanged a glance. "They found us," he said. The air went still. My pulse thundered as he pulled his gun from his jacket and motioned me toward the back door. "Go," he whispered. "Stay low. Stay quiet." I clutched the metal box to my chest, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. Through the rain-streaked window, I saw them, 2 black SUVs creeping up the drive, their headlights cutting through the mist like blades. Halcyon had come for what Martin died to protect. And this time I wasn't running. The first shot shattered the front window, glass exploded across the room, and I dropped to the floor as Eric fired back, shouting, "Down!" The sound was deafening, bullets tearing through wood and plaster, shredding the quiet like paper. My breath came in ragged gasps. The box was still in my hand, cold and heavy. I wanted to throw it away, to make it all stop, but some part of me knew this was what Martin had died for. Eric moved with brutal efficiency, crouching low behind the sofa, returning fire in short bursts. 2 shooters, he called out, eyes scanning the tree line. Maybe 3. They're going to burn the place down, I whispered. That's why we're not staying. He grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the back hallway. There's a window in the pantry. Go! We ran. The walls shook as bullets punched through the siding. The smell of gunpowder and smoke filled the air. I stumbled once, nearly losing my grip on the box, but Eric caught me and shoved me forward. When we reached the pantry, he slammed his shoulder into the window frame until it cracked open. Climb out first, he said. What about you? I'll cover you. I hesitated. His face was streaked with sweat and soot, eyes steady, every line of him screaming determination. I nodded once and climbed through the narrow opening, landing hard on the damp grass outside. The rain had started again, soft but relentless. I crouched low, clutching the box, and looked back just as Eric leapt through the window behind me. He hit the ground, rolled, and fired one last time into the darkness. Then he grabbed my hand. Run! Eric drove like a man possessed, cutting corners, weaving through the narrow lanes of the forest road, pushing the engine to its limit. I clutched the dashboard, heart hammering against my ribs. Who are they? I shouted. Halcyon cleanup team, he said through gritted teeth. They're not here to arrest us, Emily. They're here to erase us. The words froze me. I looked back, and one SUV had pulled closer, its front bumper nearly touching ours. A gunman leaned out the window, aiming. Before he could fire, Eric slammed the brakes. The SUV swerved violently, skidding off the road and slamming into a tree. I screamed, the force jerking me forward, but Eric didn't slow down. After what felt like hours, we burst onto the open highway. The remaining vehicle didn't follow. The silence that followed was so heavy, it felt unnatural. I stared out the window as we escaped into the darkness. What's on that drive, Eric? What's worth killing for? He was silent for a long time before answering. Names, he said finally. Dozens of them. People Halcyon used, husbands, wives, families. They staged their deaths to collect insurance payouts, then sold the new identities to foreign clients. Martin must have found proof. That's why they silenced him. My chest tightened. He was trying to expose them. He almost did. Eric's voice softened, but there was something darker underneath. He sent copies of the records somewhere. We just don't know where yet. I turned to face him. Then we find them. We finish what he started. He looked at me, and for the first time since the chaos began, there was something almost like respect in his eyes. You're sure about that? Yes, I said. My voice didn't even shake. He died trying to tell the truth. I'm not letting that be for nothing. Eric nodded once, gripping the wheel tighter. Then we'd better hope you're ready for what comes next. Because Halcyon doesn't leave witnesses. As we drove into the gray dawn, I looked down at my reflection in the car window, pale, hollow-eyed, unrecognizable. Somewhere deep inside, the fear began to shift into something sharper, colder. Not grief, not yet revenge, but resolve. Whatever Martin had started, I would end. Morning sunlight spilled through the windshield as we wound our way up a dirt road. The air smelled of pine and damp earth, the kind of quiet that made you question if danger could really exist in a world this still. But my hands were shaking too much to believe it. We stopped at a cafe. It was the safest place now. We had to hide in the midst of people. We chose a table in the far right and ordered a simple breakfast. I placed Martin's box on the table between us, the same one I'd pulled from the storage unit just days ago. The wood was scratched and uneven, corners worn smooth from use. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Eric finally broke the silence. Let's see what's inside. We moved through the folders methodically until my fingers brushed something cold and metallic taped to the bottom of the box. a black USB drive, the kind that looks ordinary until you realize how dangerous ordinary things can be. It had a small white sticker on it with Martin's handwriting, Halcyon_Ledger. Eric didn't hesitate. He had a laptop pulled from a bag in a heartbeat, the screen snapping to life on the cafe table between us. People around us hummed on, the barista steaming milk, cups clinking, the world pretending it didn't know what was happening here. He slid the drive into the port. A single folder opened, labeled in a font Martin never used, but whose contents were unmistakably his. Halcyon Claims, 2016 to 2023. Inside were dozens of files and 3 documents that made my breath stop. The first was a spreadsheet, columns of names, policy numbers, and payout amounts. Policy HX 77422, Larson. Payout $78,400. Policy HX 99301, Rodriguez. Payout $125,600. A single entry marked HX 00119. L. Vance showing a wire of $340,000 routed the same day to Cayman CH 8847293. At the bottom of the sheet, a tally. Total payouts, 2016 to 2023, $4,720,000. The second file was a folder of scanned documents, death certificates stamped by a single notary across 3 counties, coroner reports with the same signature line filled by Dr. Alan Pierce, yet hospital intake times that didn't match the official time of death. In one file, a photograph of a burned-out sedan was date-stamped March 12, 2021, while surveillance stills from a nearby gas station showed the deceased walking into a convenience store 3 days later under a different name. The third file was the one that made my stomach drop, a folder labeled Identities. Inside were glossy photos, smiling faces from family albums, each matched to a claim form that labeled them deceased. Tucked behind these images was a scanned page listing 7 passports with alias names and visa stamps that tracked with the wire transfer dates. There were bank ledgers too, routing numbers and intermediary accounts, all funneling into that same Cayman account. Eric clicked through until he found a PDF Martin had bookmarked, halcyon_partners.xlsx. The sheet listed executives, external notaries, and a startling note in Martin's handwriting at the margin, "Trust no one. Copy stored, backup hidden." My hands went numb. The cafe's chatter receded into a distant roar. Martin hadn't been chasing rumors. He'd mapped a ledger of stolen lives and laundered millions. And he had hidden a copy of the proof where only someone who knew him would look. We were holding it now, on a plain black thumb drive, with every name and every payment that could bring a giant down. Eric leaned back, rubbing a hand over his jaw as the reality settled in. "Jesus, Martin," he muttered. "You weren't just poking around. You were building a case." I stared at the screen, at the neat rows of falsified deaths, at the numbers that bled into 7 figures. My throat felt tight. He must have known what would happen if this got out. "He knew," Eric said quietly. "That's why he went underground." I could barely breathe. The USB sat between us, small and unassuming, yet heavy with everything he'd died protecting. So what now? Eric glanced toward the cafe window, eyes scanning the street. "Now we make sure this doesn't disappear again." He started copying the files onto a secure drive, his fingers flying over the keyboard. I watched the progress bar crawl across the screen, every second feeling like a countdown. "Eleanor," he said finally, his tone shifting, softer now. "There's something you need to understand. Once this goes public, Halcyon will come for anyone tied to it. That includes you." "I don't care," I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. "They already took my husband. I'm not letting them erase him too." He gave me a long look, the kind that weighed intent against fear. "Then we do this right. No police, no media yet. We need someone outside the system, someone who can verify these files." Who? I asked. Before he could answer, a message flashed on the laptop screen. It wasn't from any app I recognized, just a small black window with white text. Stop digging. The cursor blinked once, then again. A second message appeared. You're not the only one with the ledger. My stomach turned to ice. Eric slammed the laptop shut, swearing under his breath. They're inside the network. Who? I asked, though I already knew. Halcyon. Eric didn't speak for a long while after we left the cafe. He walked beside me, quiet but alert, scanning every passing car, every reflection in the shop windows. The morning sun had turned harsh, glaring off windshields, making everything look too sharp, too exposed. Finally, I broke the silence. So what happens now? He stopped at the curb, waiting for the light to change. Now, he said, we find out who signed off on those deaths. The insurance fraud wasn't random. It was orchestrated. Halcyon's just the front. We crossed the street and kept walking until the traffic noise thinned out. I could feel the weight of everything pressing in. Martin's death, the lies, the people still watching. I still can't make sense of it, I said quietly. He was an analyst, not some whistleblower. Why would he even get involved? Eric gave a faint, humorless smile. Because he saw something he couldn't unsee. Halcyon didn't just fake deaths for profit. They used those identities. New passports, new records, entire lives rebuilt for people who paid enough to disappear. I stopped walking. You're saying Martin uncovered all of that? He nodded. And tried to expose it. But someone found out first. A bus rumbled past, sending a gust of hot air between us. The world looked so normal that it felt absurd. I keep wondering if he knew this would happen, I said. If he ever thought it would reach me. Eric's tone softened. He did. That's why he left the box for you. You weren't supposed to chase this. You were supposed to survive it. I looked up at him then, really looked. He wasn't the same man who'd shown up on my doorstep days ago, full of cryptic warnings and half-truths. Now he looked tired, human. What about you? I asked. Why are you still here? He exhaled, eyes fixed on the skyline. Because I made him a promise. If anything ever happened to him, I'd protect you. The words hit harder than I expected. I didn't know what to say. For a long time we stood there, neither moving nor speaking. Just two people caught in the wreckage of someone else's choices. Then Eric straightened, the edge back in his voice. They'll come after the last person who had contact with Martin before he died, he said. That means you're not safe. And neither is she. She? I echoed. He looked at me. Detective Ward. She's been on this case since before you even knew it existed. If she's still digging, they'll find her next. I felt the weight of those words settle in my chest. Martin's death had been the start, not the end. And now, whatever he'd uncovered, it was pulling all of us in. Then we find her, I said quietly, before they do. Eric gave a small, grim nod. Let's hope we're not too late. By the time we reached the precinct, Ward was waiting for us outside. She looked exhausted, eyes rimmed red, her coat buttoned all the way to her throat. I was wondering when you'd show up, she said, her voice rough from too much coffee and too little sleep. Eric parked beside her and got out first. They're accelerating the payout cycle, he said. Halcyon's cleaning house. If we don't move now, all that proof dies with them. Ward's expression darkened. I figured as much. I intercepted a call this morning. They're moving documents out of their Rivergate branch. I stepped closer. You mean destroying them? Ward nodded once. Exactly. The decision was silent, but mutual. Within minutes, Ward was on her phone, her voice clipped and steady as she issued rapid orders. Activate the warrant. I want every available unit on Rivergate. Air support, too. No one gets out. Eric and I exchanged a look. Whatever hesitation had lingered was gone. This wasn't just a police run, it was a takedown. By the time we reached the vehicles, the street outside was already alive with motion. SWAT trucks roared to life, blue lights slicing through the gray dawn. Helicopter blades thundered overhead, whipping the air into a frenzy as a convoy began to form. Ward climbed into the lead SUV, jaw set, headset already in place. "Let's move," she said into the mic. "Rivergate branch, Halcyon Insurance." We hit hard and fast. Eric drove behind her, weaving through early morning traffic as sirens wailed in the distance. My pulse thrummed in my ears, matching the rhythm of the rotors above us. It wasn't fear this time, it was clarity. Every road we'd taken, every lie we'd uncovered, it all led here. Ahead, the city blurred past, glass towers reflecting the rising sun, unaware that one of them was about to collapse from the inside. As we neared the Rivergate district, Ward's voice came through the radio again, calm but charged with command. "Team Alpha, secure the perimeter. Bravo, block exits on 7th. No one leaves without my call." Eric glanced at me, a grim half-smile on his face. Showtime. When we turned the final corner, I saw it, the Halcyon building, sleek and modern, a monument to greed masquerading as stability. Even from a distance, I could see figures moving fast inside, shredding papers, hauling boxes toward waiting vans. Ward's SUV skidded to a stop. Doors slammed open. "Move!" SWAT teams poured out, weapons raised but controlled, voices sharp and coordinated. The chopper's spotlight swept across the building's glass facade as officers breached the front doors. The chaos inside exploded, shouts, crashing furniture, papers swirling through the air like confetti at the end of a rain. I stepped out, the wind from the helicopter pulling at my coat. For the first time, Halcyon didn't look untouchable. It looked terrified. Inside, men in pressed suits hurried through the lobby, shredding papers, loading boxes into vans. Ward flashed her badge, voice firm. "Detective Ward, major crimes. Step away from those documents." The security guard hesitated. The tension cracked like a gunshot. Within seconds, agents from the bureau flooded the lobby, radios buzzing, voices overlapping in controlled chaos. I stood near the center of it all, heart hammering as computers were unplugged, safes opened, hard drives bagged and tagged. That's what they'd stolen, from families who'd buried empty coffins. Ward's voice was low. "This is what Martin died trying to prove." I reached out and touched the monitor, the screen cold beneath my fingertips. My vision blurred as his handwriting flashed through my memory, his notes, his warnings, all the late nights when I thought he was just tired from work. He'd been trying to protect me, even then. Eric stepped beside me, resting a steadying hand on my shoulder. "He didn't die for nothing." Outside, the sound of sirens grew louder, news vans, patrol cars, the full storm descending. Ward took one last look around the room before nodding toward the exit. "Let's get out before the press swarms. We'll debrief at HQ." We stepped into the sunlight just as the arrests began. Halcyon executives in dark suits were led out in cuffs, faces hidden from cameras that still caught everything. The crowd pressed forward, hungry for answers. Ward said nothing. She didn't have to. The truth was already speaking for itself. I stood on the sidewalk, watching the empire crumble piece by piece, and for the first time since Martin's death, I felt something close to peace. Not joy, not relief, just the quiet certainty that the storm was finally over. Hours later, when it was all done, Ward handed me a small evidence envelope. "We found this in Langford's safe," she said. Inside was Martin's wedding ring, scratched, burnished, real. My throat tightened. He really tried to stop them. Ward's eyes softened. "He did more than try, Eleanor. He won." That night, I went to the pier, the one Martin used to take me to when life felt too big to hold. The air was cool, the sea restless but alive. I held the ring between my fingers, watching the moonlight dance across its worn surface. "For both of us," I whispered, and let it fall into the water. It sank without a sound. Martin was gone. Halcyon had fallen. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid, because the story was mine now, and I was finally free.